Hello friends and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I made this brisket style seitan. You want to make sure to use a flour that has at least 11% protein. If you watched any of my other videos, you will know that I normally use a 5-pound bag. This yields enough seitan for a family of 5, which I cook for. Here's the consistency that you want to obtain. Now, if you have not seen my vegan drumstick video, please head on over to that video before continuing here. That video will show you exactly how I wash the flour to obtain this consistency. If your consistency of dough does not look like this one here, it usually means that either you have to wash it a little bit longer or you have to squeeze out more water out of it. I wasn't sure about how much food coloring to use, so I started off with 1/4 of a teaspoon. I later added more, and you'll see that further along in this video. And now it's time to mix all the seasonings together to create a paste. I started off with nutritional yeast, sesame seed oil, and liquid smoke. This here is Dijon mustard and Better Than Bouillon seasoning. And this is the cocoa, instant coffee, and beetroot powder. This is garlic and onion powder, liquid aminos and Worcestershire sauce. And lastly, I added the food coloring. And now to mix all the ingredients together, you're going to take the smallest little whisk that you can find. Just kidding. This one here I ordered from Amazon and it turned out to be smaller than expected, but it still worked just fine. So now we're going to combine the paste, the seasoning paste, and the washed flour dough together. There are different ways to incorporate the seasoning paste into the dough. Here's one way. I took a piece of dough and I chopped it into smaller little pieces and then put that dough into the mixing bowl where the paste was and just mixed it really well. Another way is to use a food processor. That's the fastest way if you have one. I personally use my blender cup and it's a Ninja blender that works really well. So that's the easiest way for me. Do what works best for you. And now I am showing you how I incorporate the seasoning paste into the dough. I do work with small batches as to not strain my blender too much. And then I add about a tablespoon of the seasoning paste. I blend it for about 30 seconds or so. And these are my results when I use the blender. As you see here, I am using a spoon to mix the dough and the seasoning together. This is where it starts looking very realistic. It looks like real meat. Here I take my hands and I start kneading the seasonings and the dough together. I do knead it for about 5 minutes. And if you look to the top right there, you can see that I have an extra piece of dough. And what I did was I left that out to later incorporate it into the colored dough to give it a marbling effect. This is about 3 minutes later where I realized I wasn't happy with the color, so I ended up adding about 10 to 12 more drops of the food coloring and I continued kneading the dough. And now you will see how I incorporate the dough that is sitting on the side. That's going to represent the fatty tissue of the quotation marks meat. And so I just pretty much stretch it in. I'm tearing it as I go, and I just incorporate it into the colored dough as best as I can, as evenly as I can. You are going to be left with some bigger pieces of it, but that's fine. It actually turns out fine at the end. I did tear off a good size piece. This is what I'm going to use to wrap the brisket in. I did later realize I should have cut two bigger pieces, one for the bottom and one for the top, but you will see how I use that later on in the video. I am now shaping the dough. What I did was I squeezed it in my hands and stretched it at the same time. Now I make a U shape here, and then I go down on both sides, and I continue stretching it, squeezing it, and stretching it to form a long piece of dough. And that's how I'm going to rest it for the first 30 minutes, and then I'm going to knot it and rest it again. You want to make sure not to stretch the dough out too much. You want to avoid breaking it apart. And this is what the dough looks like after resting for 30 minutes. It's become more elastic and stretchy, as you see here. And now it is time to knot it to create the brisket shape. When creating the knots, you want to make sure not to make them too tight or too loose. Making them too tight will make your dough bulge up. Making it too loose will create holes in the brisket. Try your best to knot it the same direction each time. And then for the end pieces, you're gonna tuck those into the dough itself so that they become one large piece. Resting the dough another 30 to 40 minutes will help it relax and bind back together. I am using this extra piece that I had on the side to wrap it, and this is why I said I should have done two, because I was only able to wrap the top part of it. It still worked out fine, but I think it would have been better had I used the two pieces to do the top and bottom. At this point, you can use whatever rub or seasoning you would like. This one here has been my favorite lately, and here is a close-up of all of the ingredients that it has. You're going to want to rest your dough for another 30 to 40 minutes to help it bind back together before you fry it. Now this is what it looks like after it's been resting. It is now time to brown the dough on both sides before putting it in the oven. You want to make sure to oil your pan before putting the seitan dough on it, because it does tend to stick to the pan if it's not oiled. I did brown the seitan dough on both sides for about 5 minutes until it was nice and brown before placing it in an oven dish to finish cooking. And these are the ingredients that I used. I used onion, bell pepper, garlic, and the McCormick seasoning, as well as some garlic salt. I then added just enough water, not so much to cover it, but just enough to go up halfway on the pan that I was using. And this is the halfway point where most of that water had cooked out. I ended up adding more water after flipping it and continue cooking it for a total of an hour and a half. I ended up resting it overnight. I do normally use it on the same day, but at this point it was about 9 p.m. It was too late to put it in the oven, so I just made it the next day. And this is what the seitan brisket looked like. The following day, I actually cooked it for breakfast. I just added some potatoes that I seasoned to the same baking tray, and I baked it at 375 for a total of 30 minutes before adding the barbecue sauce. And here are my final results. I was really happy with the way it turned out. Not bad for being the third time I make it. My family rated it a 10 out of 10. And now to show you the consistency and texture of the brisket. It was nice and tender. It was juicy and very flavorful. I just want to say thank you for everyone who has subscribed to my channel, as well as given me some great feedback on what I can change, what I can do better. I am learning as I go, so this is really important for me, and I just want to say I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. I hope you enjoy this recipe, and if you do try it out, please tag me at Yessie's Plant-Based Diet. I would love to see your creations.